Welcome back, folks, to #AskGSM, the weekly Money Mailbag video where I answer your questions from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube right here in this video form. Lots of great questions this week. Let's get right down to them. First two come from Jose C. from YouTube, commenting on last week's video. First question was, why do you think the WWE is going away from wrestling finishers, aka the angle slam, powerbomb, and going for strike finishers like with Adam Rose, Seth Rollins, The Big Show, Bad News Barrett, etc.? Also, what have been your top 3 greatest finishers based on difficulty and wrestling type style, and what are your top 3 all-time finishers that could be simple? So I'll answer the first question first. Why is WWE straying away from finishers? And you named finishers like the angle slam, the power bomb. I'm assuming like choke slam, attitude adjustment as well. And why are they straying away from the slam finishers and now going for the strike finishers? It's easy because a guy like Adam Rose, like you mentioned, Seth Rollins, Bad News Barrett, Big Show, he uses a choke slam, so I don't know really why you named him aside from maybe the WMD, the knockout punch. But that being said, though, a lot of those guys that you mentioned are smaller. So a choke slam or a slam or any kind of like an attitude adjustment or anything like that wouldn't make sense for a smaller guy. And the landscape has completely changed from 20, 30 years ago when it was a giant's world in the WWE. So now that we have smaller guys in the form of guys like Adam Rose, Rollins, Ambrose, whoever else, it makes more sense to do strike finishers and stuff like that instead of the attitude adjustments or the choke slams or the angle slams like you mentioned before. They're good finishers for bigger guys, but for the smaller guys, it makes sense to do a strike finisher like with Adam Rose, Rollins, Ambrose, etc. The second part of your question, my top 3 greatest finishers, my favorite finishers, whatever, you kind of classified it into 2 different categories. One being based on difficulty and wrestling type, the other 3 being based on all time, and that could be simple. I didn't really classify my favorite finishers in either of those 2 categories. These are just my favorite finishers as a whole. My favorite finisher ever would have to be the RKO, the jumping cutter. I think that's an awesome finisher. As you know, as a running joke, you could do it out of nowhere, but it is a great finisher. It's a great visual. Orton has, done it to perfection. Diamond Dallas Page did it before him, and someone probably did it before him as well. But I love that finisher. I don't know if it would be my favorite all time, but if I had to pick just one, it would have to be that one. But other of my favorite finishers include the Shooting Star Press, just for being a great visual. The GTS from CM Punk, the Styles Clash, the Gut Buster even from Darren Young. I think that's a great finisher. I've performed that, not on my brother, but I've tried doing that a number of times. I've tried to go through the motions, so to speak. The zigzag, the code breaker, the 450 splash, that splash that Adrian Neville did on an episode of NXT, the Red Arrow. That finisher is a great finisher. So there's a lot of awesome finishers that I enjoy personally, but the RKO would definitely have to be at the top of that list. The second question was, how far do you think Adam Rose will go? I love Rose. I see him as a Doink the Clown, more comedy, yet he can wrestle. So I'm kind of confused on how far he can go. I'm a big Rose by myself. As of this week, he's been with WWE on the main roster for about 3 months, but he hasn't done anything aside from come out and do the entrance and that whole shtick. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, like you said, the guy can wrestle, and if you can't believe me, go back and watch his matches as Leo Kruger down in NXT against guys like Adrian Neville, Sami Zayn. He had a couple of great matches with Cesaro. He also had a very good matchup with Tyson Kidd as Adam Rose this past week in NXT. It was a very competitive matchup, by far the best matchup that Adam Rose has had to date. It wasn't a quick squash or anything like that. It was a very well-wrestled contest. So go back and check that out for further proof that Adam Rose can actually wrestle. But how far can he go? I mean, at this point, it's been 3 months. It's very limited in what they can do with him. It's not only that, I mean, with Los Matadores, I was never a big fan of because those guys are extremely limited. Primo and Epico can also wrestle, but that gimmick, I just can't see them holding gold. And I'm not saying Adam Rose can hold gold either, but like I said, the guy can wrestle. So if you have him more competitive matches, and the thing that you can do with Adam Rose as opposed to Los Matadores is that you can make him more aggressive in the ring. You go back to his matchup with Tyson Kidd from last week in NXT, he shows a lot of different aggressive traits during the matchup, gets mad. It's like he's all fun and games before the bell, but when the bell rings, the guy is all business, he's all serious, he's extremely aggressive, extremely competitive. That's what you kind of need out of the Adam Rose character, so it's more than just a gimmick, it's more than just a theme song. That's how far I think they can go with Adam Rose if last week's NXT is any indication. Whether they do that on the main roster or not is beyond me, and I doubt they will. And the character will probably fade out, and then he'll probably go back to being Legal Kruger, which could be interesting, grow back his beard back out and stuff like that. But for right now, I think it's limited because they're not doing anything with him, and people have just been accustomed to thinking that, okay, this guy's a joke, he's going to come out and do his fun entrance, and that's it, because it's really nothing ever of a matchup whenever he wrestles. So that's kind of a shame, but I think he can go further than where he is right now if they book him properly, but for the time being, for the last 3 months, it's completely wasted him. It's been a major flop, because although the guy is over in some cities more than others, they just don't really have anything for him. They don't have a storyline. They don't have a feud. Nothing. So it's kind of a waste of time, which is a shame because, like I said before, I'm a Rosebud. My buddy RJ from Wrestle Rant Radio, his question was, do you believe Goldberg should be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and would you be interested in a Brock versus Goldberg 2 if proposed? Okay, so to answer the first question on the WWE Hall of Fame, this really goes back to, and I think you and I, RJ, were talking about this on the show a couple of months ago, if Sting deserves to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. Now, if we're talking about wrestling as a whole, then yes. If we're talking about WWE, then no, because the guy's never wrestled in the company. But if Sting's going to go into the Hall of Fame based on his WCW accomplishments, and maybe they're taking into the fact that, okay, we own WCW, so that's a part of the WWE universe. Same thing with ECW. Then I guess that makes sense, but guys like Abdul the Butcher are in there, and they've never really done anything for the WWE. They've never wrestled for the company at all. Maybe they've had some sort of influence on the company, like an Antonio Inoki. He's had a lot of influence with WWF, WWE, whatever. Wrestling as a whole over the course of his career, so maybe that's why he was inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame, not the Wrestling Hall of Fame. So it really goes back and forth. It's a really two-sided argument here, whether you want to include his WCW accomplishments or it's solely the WWE. But how does this relate to Goldberg? Goldberg, if you only take into consideration his WWE accomplishments, no, the guy does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. The guy was in the company for a year. Yes, he was a world champion for a very brief time, though. He went undefeated in WCW, one of the most over acts they had, one of their biggest stars of the 90s, revolutionized Monday Night Nitro when he won the title from Hogan in his hometown. So he had a great run in WCW, and if we're taking that into consideration, then yes, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But if we're going to be straight even here and Sting doesn't deserve to go in because he's never wrestled for the company, he's never done anything WWE, then Goldberg doesn't deserve to go in either. But if we are talking about WCW accomplishments and wrestling as a whole, then yes, he does deserve to go in at some point. He's not a top priority, but when they start running out of people to induct, they start inducting mid-card guys, and maybe they could put Goldberg in there. I'm not saying he was ever a mid-card guy, but he's not like a top priority. He's not like we need to induct him right now, like Macho Man Randy Savage right now, or like an Ultimate Warrior or Bruno or whoever else, Bob Backlund. Goldberg, I think, is a second priority, maybe down the line. But yes, I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And the WWE Hall of Fame, no, but the WWE treats their Hall of Fame as like wrestling as a whole. So whatever. It's all politics anyway, so whatever. But yeah, I'd like to see him inducted. As far as your second question, would you be interested in a Brock versus Goldberg 2 match? No, for a variety of reasons. One, their first match sucked. And don't say that it's only because they were both leaving. I mean, you take that out of consideration. The match sucked anyway. It was not a good matchup at all. Probably in the argument of one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. And they just did not have good chemistry. It was a good feud, but the match sucked. And I have no desire of seeing a sequel, so to speak, to that contest. Especially if Goldberg, if you really think about it, the guy has said in interviews in the past that he would take into consideration into returning to WWE for a large amount of money, and he wouldn't fucking lose. We're talking about Goldberg here. This guy is not going to lose. So he wouldn't beat Brock, and he beat Brock the first time. So if Brock's going to lose, the guy who just ended the fucking Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania is going to lose to a guy that's coming back for one match at WrestleMania, then there's no fucking point whatsoever. So no, I don't want to see that matchup. But I'm not saying I don't want to see Goldberg back in WWE. I think that'd be cool. I've said this to my friends before, to my friend John at HeelByDesign on Twitter. We were talking about this a few weeks ago. It would be cool to see Goldberg back in WWE. Maybe not as a full-time run, like competing on every Raw or SmackDown. I don't see that at all. If anything, like I said before, for just one more match at WrestleMania. But it would be cool. I would definitely mark out to see Goldberg in WWE. Since I've been a fan in no way, I've never seen him on WWE programming. But if I heard that music go off on an episode of Raw or a pay-per-view or something, I would mark. I think that'd be great. So that'd be very cool to see him back in WWE, if only for one match down the line, just not against Brock Lesnar. Victor T, his question was, you said you started watching you started watching wrestling in 2008. That's correct. How much of wrestling's history have you gone back and watched? So this is kind of a hard question to answer because I don't go back and watch like chunks of wrestling at a time. I don't go back and watch like the entire 1999, the entire Attitude Era. I've watched, I can't even tell you how many hours of wrestling I've watched since I became a fan. Not only watched wrestling, like gone back and watched old matches and stuff like that. Like I've watched matches on DVDs, the network, obviously, people's, from YouTube and stuff like that. So I've watched a lot of wrestling from over the years. Most notably, a lot more of the recent stuff. And I'm not talking about in the last 5 years, but I'm talking about like the last 15 years. Not so much like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. My friend John has recently got into that stuff, so great for him. I'm not a big Legends of Wrestling guy. Not that I don't like it, I just don't have the time to watch it, but I do want to watch it at some point because it is a great show from what I've seen and from what I've heard. But with that being said, though, how much have I watched? A lot, and I've probably read more about wrestling than I have watched it. Watching or reading the Rise and Fall of WCW book, great novel, check it out. Rise and Fall of ECW. Wrestling for Dummies is a book that like went out of commission like a decade ago. It was published in 2000. My dad got it for me as a gift, I think last summer, and I read it for all of last summer. I thought it was great. Taught me a lot about the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even during the Attitude Era too, because that was published in 2000, like I said, right at the tail end of the Attitude Era. So go out of your way to find that book if you can find it. I don't know where he found it. I think he found it in like a library or something because they don't even publish it anymore. You might be able to find it online somewhere, but how much have I watched? A lot. I'm not going to say I'm a wrestling expert. I'm continuously learning more about wrestling every single day. That's just the kind of fan I am. Going back and watching more stuff. I like to learn more stuff, even if it's going up on Wikipedia or any other website on the internet, learning more about a certain angle, a matchup, a storyline, a real-life incident, anything. I love learning about wrestling, so I've watched a great deal of wrestling beyond 2008 since I started watching in that year. And I've probably read more than I have watched. And with the network around, I can watch more than ever. Next question comes from Andre G. His question was, when do you think Cena versus Reigns will happen? And his second question was, who should Daniel Bryan feud with when he returns? So for the first question, when do I think Cena versus Reigns will happen? It's being built up like the Cena-Ryback matchup was, like when those two were the biggest fan favorites on the show, which is mind-boggling to think about now. But that was less than 2 years ago. May I remind you. That being said, though, they blew their load with that matchup the night after WrestleMania. They ruined that feud after turning Ryback heel, and I don't at all hope that they do the same thing with Roman Reigns. I think he's too over at this point to turn him heel. I said the same thing with Ryback, so I could be proven wrong. Who knows? But with that being said, though, when they should do it, definitely not anytime soon. I think they'd be wasting a boatload of money if they were to do it anytime within the next few months or even by the end of the year. If anything, I don't want to see it as a feud going into WrestleMania like a Royal Rumble matchup or an Elimination Chamber match. I want to see it after WrestleMania, maybe next year at SummerSlam or post-WrestleMania feud when they really don't have any other choice. I could definitely see them doing it by the end of the year when Brock is gone and all the part-timers are gone. I can definitely see that happening. I don't want to see it happen by the end of the year, but if I were to book it, I would do it at least by mid-next year, not anytime soon. Roman Reigns is not in that spot yet. And the next question from Jared, actually, I answered that question. I'll get to that in a minute. I just don't think Roman Reigns is ready for a one-on-one main event feud for the championship. And I'm assuming if that match was to happen, it would be over the title. So when do I think it will happen? At least at some point within the next year. I'll definitely say that much. If not by next SummerSlam, then maybe after WrestleMania next year at Extreme Rules, Payback, whatever. Hopefully, like I said before, they don't do it at any point within the next few months because I think it's far too soon. The second part of his question, who should Daniel Bryan feud with when he returns? Who will he feud with? I'm hoping not Kane. They'll probably want to blow that feud off, but he's going to be gone for so long. I just read today that he might be out until the Royal Rumble because he requires a second surgery. So if you reignite that feud upon his fucking return, then what is the fucking point? I mean, I could see them doing it like at Money in the Bank a couple of months ago when Daniel Bryan was fresh off of leaving and then coming back and fresh off of that feud. But that feud wasn't really all that great to begin with. So to resume it would feel pointless. I know Daniel Bryan might want to get his vengeance on Kane for taking him out, all that bullshit. I can see that, and hopefully they don't do that when he returns. But who could he feud with? Who do I want to see him feud with? Seth Rollins and Daniel Bryan could have a great series of matches, whether it be over the championship or not. Because remember, Seth Rollins is the current Mr. Money in the Bank. So if he wins the championship in Daniel Bryan's absence, Daniel Bryan says, hey, I never lost the title. I want my title shot. You do those two going into WrestleMania. I don't know if you do it as a WrestleMania match, but it'd be a great feud nevertheless wherever it takes place. SummerSlam, WrestleMania, TLC, I don't care. It'd be a great feud regardless. So Rollins and Daniel Bryan would be a great feud to do when Daniel Bryan gets back. Him and Dean Ambrose, when Dean Ambrose eventually goes heel. Him and Roman Reigns, I think it's far too soon. Daniel Bryan and Cena, we talked about that here on the show before. I think we could do that match, or I think we could see that matchup. Cena Bryan number 2 happening at some point. I think maybe not at WrestleMania next year or beforehand. If at WrestleMania, that'd be great. Especially since their first matchup took place at SummerSlam, and to do the rematch on the next biggest stage of them all at WrestleMania would be great. But yeah, I think Daniel Bryan versus Seth Rollins would be a tremendous feud to do when Daniel Bryan gets back. The matches, the feud itself would be great, regardless of whether it's over the championship or not. I would hope that it would be. Next question comes from Jared J. He asks, do you think Roman Reigns will be ready to be the next face of the company by the 2015 Royal Rumble? I do think, in my personal opinion, that he will be ready to be not the face of the company, to be one of the top faces in the company by the time the next year's road to WrestleMania begins. I don't think he will be the face of the company by the time 2015 rolls around. John Cena, I could definitely see, and I've said this before, John Cena will be the face of the company for years to come. And it won't be 2015, 2016. In my opinion, anything can happen. The guy could break his neck tomorrow. His career could end. Not that I'm saying that I would hope that would happen. That would be terrible. But I mean, this guy could break his neck tomorrow. He's out of wrestling forever. Who takes over for him in the meantime? Then maybe, yes, Roman Reigns. But with CM Punk gone and Daniel Bryan out of the picture for right now, I can definitely see Roman Reigns being groomed to be the next guy in WWE. Do I see him being the next face of the company, doing all the media by the time the next Royal Rumble comes around? Absolutely not. But I could definitely see him being a leading face in the company, maybe the number 2 baby face behind John Cena, and potentially winning the championship at WrestleMania 31 and kind of building him up to be one of the leading faces and grooming him to be that next guy when John Cena eventually leaves. Like I said before, I don't see that happening anytime soon with Cena leaving and retiring and not being the face of the company. I think he'll be the face of the company for years to come. But Roman Reigns will definitely be up there and ready to take his spot when he eventually does leave. Next question from Paul S. His question was, do you think the WWE will give Prince Devitt a new gimmick in NXT, or will they let his indie gimmick continue? I have seen a New Japan match before between Devitt and X-Pac, or not X-Pac, between Pac, Adrian Neville. Do you think Triple H will one day book those two in a matchup? So, 2 questions here. I'll answer the first one real quick. Will they let him use his indie gimmick? Probably not. If I had to take a guess, WWE likes to own everything. So giving them a completely new name, a completely new gimmick. And I was listening to this on the Solo Monster Sounds Off this past week. Great show. Go out of your way to listen to it. He was talking about how the WWE.com staff, in the report of Prince Devitt, when he signed, that they were talking about how he used the body paint during his matches on the indie circuit and stuff like that. And I know just because it said it on the website in that report doesn't mean it's going to necessarily translate over to television. They're going to let him use it. I don't know. They just might be making mention of something that he used to do and won't necessarily be doing anymore. I don't know if he'll be using the Prince Devitt name. I could see him using just Devitt. That'd be great if it was just Devitt, or maybe not Fergal Devitt. Fergal sounds a little bit weird. That's not marketable. But just Devitt would be great, if not Prince Devitt. Like I said before, WWE likes to own everything. They're going to trademark the shit out of his name. So I'd be very surprised if they let him use the name Prince Devitt. If they let him use his own gimmick, also I'd be surprised with. And if they do change his gimmick up just a bit, that's just it. Hopefully it's just a bit, and it's not like tremendously, and they completely change his gimmick, go from like Brodus Clay the Juggernaut to Brodus Clay the Funkasaurus, like a complete 180, like kind of that kind of thing. Hopefully they don't do that with Devitt. I don't see them doing that with Devitt, but you never know with WWE, so I wouldn't be surprised. But hopefully they give him a gimmick that is something along the lines of what he used to do on the indie circuit and don't change his appearance all that much. I know he wouldn't mind. He said this before, that I don't care if they have to change me up or whatever, if they strip me of my name. Or maybe Kenta said that or whatever. But either way, I don't see them, even though he's willing to, I don't think they should. Just because they want to own everything, they want to completely say they have 100% control over this gimmick, over the name. That they should change it all that much from the originality of it, from the original form of the name and gimmick. Second part of your question: should Triple H book a match one day between Pac, Adrian Neville, and Devitt? Yes, absolutely. That's one of the best parts about Prince Devitt coming to NXT. Should it be in NXT for 2 years like Sami Zayn? I don't think so. Sami Zayn was ready a long time ago. He's just kind of, treading water in NXT. He's doing great stuff in NXT, don't get me wrong, but the guy could be fucking called up tomorrow and he'd be ready for the main roster. The guy was ready when he was brought into WWE. They're just putting him in NXT because they don't have anything for him on the main roster right now, which is fine. I understand that. Probably the best course of action to take. But Adrian Neville versus Devitt, especially over the NXT title, I don't know how long Neville's going to be holding that championship for, but that'd be a great matchup to do down the line, just in terms of an in-ring action standpoint. I know they did Zayn and Neville late last year. That was a terrific matchup, and I think someone asked me a question about that last week, but I hope they do a rematch between those two, because that was a great matchup to do. And I have hope that Devitt and Pac, aka Adrian Neville, could have an even better matchup if given the right amount of time. Also, given their history, whether they would mention that on commentary or not, I don't know. They might just give one of those vague descriptions saying that they've fought all over the world. They won't mention like a specific company, but they'll say that they've had many matches before all over the world and that kind of thing. And they did mention his background in the past promotions that he's been in, so that's good. So at least they're not going to completely take that away from his identity in the WWE. But absolutely, I could see them facing each other in NXT at some point down the road. Not too soon. I don't think they want to blow their load with that matchup too soon. You just got to build up to it. But yes, definitely down the road, I could see that matchup happening. Christian H, his question was, what do you think killed TNA? The management or bringing in the MMA stars for no reason? It really wasn't one thing. It was just kind of a combination of everything. The whole Vince Russo bullshit with them lying to Spike TV about that. But let's not say that TNA is dead as of right now. They might not have a TV deal. And not even that is confirmed right now. I mean, right now, I guess it's ongoing negotiations, or it has been canceled, or not renewed. I don't know what the fuck is going on with TNA right now. Just a lot of stuff going on between Spike TV and TNA. But that being said, though, what exactly killed TNA? First of all, fucking Hulk Hogan. I'm a big Hogan fan, and people will say, not just to me, but I mean just to everybody, oh, you hated him in TNA, but why do you love him so much in WWE? Because he has no fucking power in the WWE. He has no power. In TNA, they gave him all the power in the world, and that's why the company went down the tubes from 2010 to 2013. I mean, there was a brief period of time in 2012 when they were doing great, but every other time when they gave Hogan power, they completely ruined it. They completely altered the image of TNA. They tried to make it a WWE light. It was ridiculous. So that was one thing, wasting all of their money on Hulk Hogan, who did nothing to benefit the company whatsoever. Maybe a little thing here and there, but as a whole, it was a complete failure to bring Hulk Hogan into the WWE, or into TNA, I'm sorry. Same thing with Eric Bischoff. That was a waste of money too. Ric Flair was a fucking waste of money. They did some good things with him and fortune and stuff like that, but as a whole, waste of money, waste of time, waste of Ric Flair's time. The MMA stars, as you mentioned, that was also a waste of time. Maybe not King Mo, because they brought him in about 2 years ago, and he's still under contract with TNA, and he just resurfaced on television as Dixie Carter's muscle, heavy, whatever. Why? I have no idea, especially if the guy's not going to wrestle. They brought him in for Bound for Glory a couple of years ago and haven't used him since, aside from just recently. But that being said, though, who else is still there? Not Tito Ortiz. I think Tito Ortiz is still in TNA, might be doing something at some point. He might be still under contract. Rampage Jackson recently did an interview last week, and he was just trashing TNA, saying the management sucked, which is also a very big part of why of TNA's demise with Dixie Carter at the head of the ship. Her just ruining everything. Not everything, but most things, I guess I should say. Her being on TV every week for no fucking apparent reason. Yes, she gets heat, but it's not the type of heat that she should be getting. It's go away heat. No one wants to fucking see her. Thankfully, they're writing her out of storylines this Thursday. Might be too little too late, but I'm still looking forward to it anyway. The MMA stars, Rampage Jackson. I'm a big fan of Rampage Jackson and his UFC work, but bringing him into TNA was a complete waste of time. They did nothing with that. They teased the whole thing with Kurt Angle, had him join the Mafia, did a little feud with Tito Ortiz for no reason. Even he said that, feuding with a legitimate fighter in the scripted pro wrestling world makes no sense. just to promote their fight. I understand that aspect of it, but as a whole, that was also a waste of time. He's done with the company too. So it was never really one thing that killed TNA. It was just a lot of the different parts and pieces that have contributed to the quote-unquote demise of TNA. Because like I said before, it's not dead yet. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's not start writing our books on the rise and fall of TNA or just the fall of TNA or whatever. But anyway, though, yeah, those just little things have killed TNA over the years. They're not dead yet, but it has contributed to a lot to their problems that they're having right now. So the next question comes from at WWE WHC. We're getting to the Twitter questions now. His question was, if built up enough / correctly, can a SummerSlam title win mean as much as it would have if it happened at WrestleMania? I'm assuming he's talking about Brock Lesnar here. Yes, absolutely, a SummerSlam title win. That's where he won his first championship to begin with. His first WWE title from The Rock at SummerSlam 2002, one of the best SummerSlams ever. You can watch it on the network, cheap plug. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think had he not ended the streak, had he just won the championship at WrestleMania this year, it definitely would not have meant as much because he didn't have the momentum. Granted, he had beaten Triple H, CM Punk, and Big Show in pay-per-view matches before that, but it would not have meant as much because at the time he hadn't ended the streak. Now with the most momentum he's ever had in his career, or anybody for that matter, because no one's ever ended the streak with The Undertaker before, obviously, he has that much more pressure on him going into SummerSlam. It makes the match mean more with John Cena. The match itself is going to be great. The feud itself has been great so far with the promos with Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman and John Cena. It's all been great so far, so I'm really enjoying it. Absolutely, the SummerSlam title win will mean as much, if not more than it would have at WrestleMania for Brock Lesnar. Next question comes from at the N Innovator. His question was, who do you think was the best SmackDown superstar of all time during the brand split? I did an article on this actually a few months ago when the 15th anniversary of SmackDown, not the official anniversary in August, but when the show first aired its first episode, I think in April of 1998, 99, I'm sorry, yeah, 99. And I listed a whole bunch of superstars. Brock Lesnar is on there. He revolutionized the SmackDown brand during the Attitude Era from 02 to 04 before he left. Is he greatest SmackDown superstar of all time? I wouldn't say that because it was only 2 years that he was there for, then he ditched. Had he been there longer, maybe. Batista is another obvious one. He helped SmackDown a lot when he was drafted there in 05 and basically dominated the show. He was in almost every World Championship matchup from 05 to 2008 when he was drafted back to Raw. And he also did some stuff on SmackDown before he went back to Raw in 2010. He did the whole heel turn with Rey Mysterio. You were supposed to be my friend in 09, so that was good stuff too. Edge is another big name that you obviously can't forget about. Edge, when he not really drafted, but when he moved to SmackDown in 2007, he made that fucking show his own. He dominated it like Batista. He was in a lot of the World Championship matches. He made Friday nights watchable again. I mean, SmackDown was the better show, and someone else asked a question about this. I'll get to it in a little bit. About SmackDown being the better show during the Ruthless Aggression era, and I agree. And it really had lost its luster from 05 to 08 when Batista was on top. I mean, it was still a good show, but it wasn't as great as it used to be. So when Edge took over in 07, really made the show his own from 07 to 2010. And then when he was drafted or moved back to SmackDown in 2010 and later of that year before he retired, it left a vacant spot atop the SmackDown roster, and then the brand split happened, or the brand split ended shortly thereafter that, coincidentally enough, because Edge had retired and the top face of SmackDown was basically gone. And Randy Orton tried to fill that spot a little bit, but it just wasn't the same. But that being said, though, Edge is obviously a big one. But in my opinion, the best SmackDown superstar of all time has to be The Undertaker. The guy was moved to SmackDown in 02, and what Shawn Michaels was to Raw over the course of his career was what The Undertaker was to SmackDown. For almost 10 years before the guy became a part-timer in 2010, 2011, whatever it was, the guy put over so many people on SmackDown, had held a handful of world championships, was involved in a lot of great feuds with Batista, with Edge, a lot of individuals, JBL, over the course of those 10 years. So I would have to give the nod to Undertaker as the greatest SmackDown superstar of all time, in my opinion anyway. At Cody Collier 12, his question was, What is your favorite SmackDown moment or storyline since you started watching WWE in April of 2008? Good question. I was thinking back, and I'm trying to think of a lot of like SmackDown moments that really stood out in my mind. There weren't really all that many. There's probably a handful of them that I just can't think of off the top of my head. One of them would have to be The Undertaker tombstoning Vicky Guerrero. It was an episode of SmackDown. It might have been for the second time. The first time happened before I became a fan. The second time happened, I think, in September of 2008. And I remember just watching that vividly. I remember it very clearly. It was a great moment. Vicky Guerrero, I think, was still in the wheelchair at the time, put back in the wheelchair because of that. It was a great moment. My brother, who wasn't even a wrestling fan, my older brother, said that he was at a friend's house that night, and he was flipping through the channels, and he called me up afterwards and said, "Did you see The Undertaker tombstone Vicky Guerrero?" And even he was excited about it because he hated Vicky as much as I did. That was a great moment that I remember very clearly. 09 for SmackDown really wasn't all that good. Oh, no, CM Punk and Jeff Hardy had a very good feud on SmackDown during that year. So that was good. I'm really trying to think of anything else. SmackDown moments. I've said this before. The moment I became a true fan of CM Punk was when he had that segment with Big Show. And it's very forgettable for most fans, but for me, it sticks out in my mind. He had a segment with Big Show, and he SmackDown before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view in 2010. It was when he was still wearing the mask. It was actually that night that he got unmasked. And the facial expression that he had looking at Big Show, all shocked and stuff, it was great. It was so hilarious. And that was when CM Punk really started to show some personality on the mic and stuff like that. And he had before, but this was when he really started to act like himself when he was a heel and not preaching people for the whole straight edge bullshit and that kind of straight edge society kind of thing. Even though I am straight edge, but anyway. So that was a SmackDown moment that sticks out in my mind. What else? Christian turning heel in 2011 when he smacked Randy Orton over the back of the head with a world championship. Not the best SmackDown moment that sticks out in my mind, but it just comes to my mind as a memorable moment. I enjoyed that, the whole Christian heel turn. That whole feud as a whole, I thought was tremendous. But yeah, those are only a few. There's probably a lot more that I can't think of, but those are three of them. At Ambrose311, his question was, out of all the wrestlers outside of the WWE, who would you like to see in WWE, or who would you like to see WWE sign, and why? I've talked about this before, but Antonio Thomas from NECW, he's a great talent. And before I go any further, let me just say this. I would love to see these people in WWE. I'm not confident. I'm not at all confident, actually, that WWE, if they were to sign any of these guys, would use them accordingly or properly. They would probably end up on Superstars or even not even make it past NXT because WWE doesn't know how to market some talent. They already have enough talent in their Performance Center and NXT and on the roster. There's already enough guys as it is that they're not doing anything with, so I don't need any more top guys in WWE right now. So anyway, though, Antonio Thomas, great talent. Check him out, NECW. Great guy, too. I would love to see him in WWE or TNA for that matter. Matt Taven was another guy from Ring of Honor who I've been a fan of long before I ever started watching Ring of Honor. Dating back 5 years ago, I saw this guy. And right before he won the New England, the Northeast Wrestling Championship, they have been a big fan of him. So I would love to see him in WWE. I know there was a rumor of WWE signing him a couple of years ago. Nothing ever came of it. He's a little bit bland as a babyface, but as a heel, he's great. So I would love to see him in WWE. Now for the ROH TNA guys that I would sign from those companies to the WWE. Jay Lethal, I think, is great. Have always been a fan of his. As a face, heel, he's shown in ROH that he can shine as. He's a great talent in the ring, on the mic, very charismatic. He'd be awesome in WWE. AJ Styles, another very obvious one. I don't see him ever being in the WWE, unfortunately. I'm not saying that it will never ever happen, but I just don't see it really being a big possibility, unfortunately. But AJ Styles is an obvious one of someone that I would love to see in the WWE. Bobby Roode is another guy that fits the WWE mold. Great in the ring, great on the mic. It has that look, has that everything, that full package, that complete package that WWE would be looking for. But like I said, they have enough talent in NXT and on the main roster and in the Performance Center that they don't really need any more talent than they already have. But yeah, if anything, if I was to top the WWE, I would sign any one of those guys because they're all great. At Thomas_B96, his question was, do you think Benoit's depression had a lot to do with Eddie Guerrero? Absolutely. After Eddie Guerrero died, Chavo talked about this on Jericho's podcast, and Jericho talked about it in the book as well. But definitely after Eddie Guerrero died, and it wasn't only Eddie Guerrero, there were a lot of other people, I think, that were close to Benoit, a lot of old friends that had passed away, so that really all contributed. That's not the sole reason why Benoit did what he did, but it definitely was a big factor. Jericho went so far as to say that he wasn't really the same after Eddie Guerrero died, very depressed. So yeah, that was definitely a big factor with Eddie Guerrero's passing in late '05 because they were very, very good friends. So yeah, definitely played a factor in the whole Benoit shtick 2 years later. Like I said, not the sole reason, but definitely a major factor that plays into a major factor that played into the depression of Chris Benoit from that point forward. So absolutely. At Green Day Bunny X, her question was, what are you most looking forward to at SummerSlam? Great question. I'm looking forward to SummerSlam as a whole. SummerSlam the last few years has been tremendous. 2011, 2013, even 2012 I thought was good too. But what am I looking forward to most at SummerSlam this year? Kind of a tie between two different matches. Cena and Lesnar should be awesome. A great matchup, great feud as far as I said before. So looking forward to that. And Brock Lesnar winning the championship. It's not a guarantee right now, but if it doesn't happen, the internet will explode. I can promise you of that. But I'm looking forward to that. And Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins is another match I'm very much looking forward to. Here's hoping that matchup gets a stipulation. The feud, the build has kind of cooled off in recent weeks. But that being said, though, it's still a great matchup. They did a great job of building it up from the breakup from the Shield, from that point forward. So I look forward to that matchup at SummerSlam. AJ and Paige should be a great matchup. Those two have been building their feud up so tremendously over the last couple of weeks, especially if you go back to Raw and SmackDown last week with the whole pushing up the stage angle with AJ. I thought that was great. One of the best angles they've done in the Divas division over the Divas title in years. Even before the AJ and Caitlyn feud, which I was also a very big fan of. I think this feud is even shaping up to be better than that, which is really saying something. That I thought that was a great feud. Because they had history both inside and outside the ring. But I'm looking forward to AJ and Paige at SummerSlam, the rematch for the Divas Championship. Even Jericho Wyatt should be good. All these matches really have potential to be great. So I'm looking forward to SummerSlam as a whole. At Hardy DX Fan, his question was, do you believe the phrase controversy creates cash works in WWE, especially with the Lana Rusev incident? Great question. Not really in the case with Rusev and Lana. I mean, I know WWE wasn't looking for the mainstream attention, and maybe they were when they had Lana talk about the current events at the Battleground. Was it Battleground? Yeah, it was at Battleground a couple of weeks ago. When she said the whole current events line, that garnered a lot of negative mainstream attention for the WWE, which is something maybe if you ask Vince McMahon 10 years ago, maybe you ask him today, it's the same question, it's the same answer, but he would say yes, any attention, any publicity is good publicity. Not really the case in 2014 with the world, with the society as a whole being so sensitive that it's just not the same. So no, I don't really think that it creates cash. Controversy creates cash in that specific incident with Lana and Rusev. I don't think if they have him talking about how Putin was behind the whole Malaysian crash thing and all that kind of stuff, that it would cause people to say, oh, I want to see that guy get his ass kicked. It would turn a lot of people off because it's very tasteless. I don't think what they did at Battleground was tasteless. I think it was just a minor mistake that they should not have done. But I don't think it would create cash in the sense like I want to see Rusev get beaten out because he was talking about the Malaysian flight. No, for a lot of people, it would just make people turn off the TV. That's the difference between 2014 and 1999, 15 years ago. But yeah, it does create, controversy does create cash in a lot of different situations. I mean, you go back to the book by Eric Bischoff. That's the motto that he lived by. And then WCW went into business. So there's your answer to that. But no, I don't really think it works all that well in the case of Lana and Rusev. At Chris Krieger, his question was, what is the happiest and angriest that you've been after a title change? Happiest? I mean, I've been happy for so many title changes. When Miz won the WWE title, when Christian won the World Heavyweight Championship at Extreme Rules 2011. There's really a lot of moments that I've been happy for. One that really comes to mind, I think obviously I talked about this in the video blog a couple of weeks ago. Punk, when he won the WWE title, Money in the Bank 2011, that's an obvious one. So I would have to put that as my happiest, I guess, after a title change. Angriest, not really nearly as many as happiest, but whenever John Cena won the WWE title, more often than not, I would have been fine with the title change. But specifically at the Night of Champions pay-per-view 2011, when he made Del Rio fucking tap out, that was ridiculous. I was so pissed because Del Rio's title reign lasted like all of 5 weeks, and it ruined any momentum that he had up to that point. And he hasn't been the same since. So I was so pissed after that. When he won the championship at WrestleMania 29, I saw it coming, so I wasn't pissed per se. I was just disappointed. I still say there's a difference between being disappointed with the title change or being pissed with one. I was more disappointed with the WrestleMania 29 change. I was legit pissed with the title win for Cena in 2011 at Night of Champions. That made me angry. I guess this also falls into the disappointment category with Randy Orton beating Daniel Bryan for the championship at Hell in a Cell last year. I really wanted Daniel Bryan to win the championship, and the blow up for the whole angle, the payoff for it, what happened at WrestleMania. I understand that. At the time, I didn't really think about that, but at the time, I'm thinking this is bullshit. They screwed over Daniel Bryan time and time again. Randy Orton is the champion. John Cena versus Orton in the main event of Survivor Series. What is it, fucking 2007? Like, it made no sense whatsoever, and I was disappointed with that. But, yeah, those would have to be a few of the happiest and angriest reactions that I've had to title changes over the years. Those are only a few of the many. Those are only the ones that come to mind off the top of my head. At the Justin Godsey, his question was, did you ever think the SmackDown brand had the better show overall in 2003? I had that feeling. I wasn't a fan at the time, so I can't tell you, but looking back on the shows, looking back at what happened, the storylines and stuff like that, absolutely SmackDown had the better show. 03 was dominated by Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, who had a great series of matches at WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and that Iron Man match on SmackDown over the WWE Championship. So those guys, I think, were revolutionizing the SmackDown brand in 2003. The tag team division was at its finest. So absolutely, I think 2003 was the better year for SmackDown, overall, that is. That was also the case a few years, maybe in 02, maybe even in 04. But yeah, absolutely in 03, SmackDown was the better show. 03 was SmackDown. 03, I'm trying to think of what happened on Raw. Triple H dominated the reign of terror, so to speak, of Triple H in the world, being the World Heavyweight Champion for most of the year. Goldberg coming in, but that was kind of botched. So, absolutely, I would say that SmackDown had the better show overall in 2003. At Young Daffy, his question was, what are the top 5 matches of 2014 so far? So we are over halfway through with 2014, which is even crazy to think about. We are entering August as it is. But top 5 matches so far, I've put in no specific order. Shield and Evolution from Extreme Rules. I enjoyed that matchup more than their payback match. Shield versus Wyatt from Elimination Chamber. Bryan, Batista, and Orton in the triple threat match from SummerSlam over the championship. Either that or Bryan versus Triple H. Both matches are interchangeable. I really enjoyed both matches. But either are interchangeable. The Usos versus the Wyatts from the Battleground pay-per-view. I thought that was a tremendous, fantastic contest to kick off the show. I've talked about this before, but a great matchup from those guys. Definitely my favorite matches of 2014 for me personally. And Daniel Bryan versus Bray Wyatt I thought was a great matchup at the Royal Rumble this year, so I would have to put that on the list as well. Honorable mention, I would put Cesaro and Neville here. Cesaro and Sami Zayn from Arrival this year. I thought that was a great matchup. Definitely go back and watch that. If you're not a big NXT guy, watch that matchup and then get hooked on the product. Tremendous contest from Cesaro and Zayn. They just have such great chemistry together that I hope it's not the last time they clash. Hopefully, whether it be in NXT or on the main roster, their feud is far from over. I can guarantee you of that. Final question comes from @RawsGibby. His question was, could Vince Russo be a heel manager in a wrestling promotion? I say no, and I don't think a wrestling promotion would ever hire Vince Russo to be a manager. Yes, he has heat on him in reality, but sometimes it doesn't always translate well to the wrestling world. It's more go-away heat than it is substantial, I want to see you get your ass kicked heat. It's really a big difference between the two. Dixie Carter gets the go-away heat. I think Vince Russo would too. And if you really think about it, the guy was associated with the demise. As of right now, I mean, like we said, TNA is not dead as of yet, but he was a major factor in Spike TV reportedly not renewing the contract of Impact Wrestling. So as of right now, he has been involved in the demise of 2 major wrestling promotions in WCW and possibly TNA. So I don't know if any wrestling promotion should, or even if they want to, get their hands on Vince Russo. Yes, he doesn't deserve all the hate that he gets. He is smart in some ways, more than a lot of people give him credit for. The guy's a mastermind, but he is a big goof for the most part. He's very arrogant. He's dumb in a lot of ways if you go on his Twitter and you look at the rants he's done and all the bullshit that he's pulled over the last few years alone, if ever, his entire, last 15, 20 years. But the last few years alone go to show that no wrestling promotion should ever want to get their hands on Vince Russo. The guy's a big-ass wrestling fan. He's a diehard fan. I understand that. But by no means do I ever want to see him as a manager in any wrestling promotion, regardless of how much heat he may get. Not the good amount of heat, not the good type of heat that he wants to be getting. But absolutely, I do not want to see Vince Russo associated with any wrestling promotion after what he's done to WCW and TNA in the last 15 years. And that's going to do it for this week's hashtag AskGSM video. If you want to send in a question for next week, you can leave a comment down below and it will be featured in next week's video. Tweet me on the Twitter at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM, or find me on Facebook, GrahamGSM Matthews. Leave a comment on the wall or leave a comment on the post that I put up on Sunday nights when I ask for questions. All support is greatly appreciated. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm GrahamGSM Matthews, and I'll catch you guys next week.